In that courtroom, my brother stood tall, pointing at me with fire in his eyes and called me a fraud. He said I was nothing, that I had lied about everything, even my scars. The crowd laughed, the whispers cut deep. And for a moment, I almost believed him. But then the doors opened, and the truth I had carried in silence for 8 long years walked in. What happened next changed my family, my future, and my life forever. My name is Claire Donovan, and if you looked at us from the outside, you might have thought the Donovans were the picture of an all-American family. A neat 2-story house in a small Ohio town, a white fence, a father who built his own construction company from nothing, 2 children, and a mother who baked pies for the church every Sunday. It looked perfect until you stepped inside. My father, Richard Donovan, was the kind of man people in town admired. He worked hard, shook hands firmly, and had a reputation for honesty. To his workers, he was Mr. D, the man who gave them steady jobs. To neighbors, he was the man who sponsored Little League and bought the Christmas tree for the town square. To my brother, Mark, he was a hero. To me, he was someone I desperately wanted to see me but rarely did. When I was 15, life shattered. My mother, Linda, was diagnosed with breast cancer. Within 6 months, she was gone. The house, once filled with laughter and the smell of fresh bread, turned into a museum of silence. Dad buried himself in work, gone before sunrise and back long after dark. And Mark, already 20, strong, confident, slipped right into Dad's shadow at the construction firm. And me? I was invisible. I stayed in my room, textbooks stacked around me like walls. Straight A's, honor rolls, awards pinned to a corkboard that no one ever looked at. While Dad praised Mark for landing a new contract, I silently celebrated solving calculus problems. While Mark got a brand new Chevy truck for his 18th birthday, I got a dented hand-me-down sedan with peeling paint. It wasn't the car that broke me. It was the message. Mark is the future. Claire is the afterthought. Dinner conversations revolved around concrete bids, new office buildings, Mark's great instincts. I would try to share something, a scholarship I won, a debate trophy, but the words floated into the air and died there, unanswered. Dad would smile politely, nod, then turn back to Mark. I started to keep count. How many times did Dad ask Mark's opinion? How many times did he ask mine? For every 20 questions he asked Mark, maybe 1 out of courtesy came my way. But the wound cut deepest my senior year of high school. I had worked tirelessly for years, driven by the secret hope that maybe, just maybe, if I shined brightly enough, Dad would finally see me. I became valedictorian, earning the right to stand on that stage and deliver a speech I had rehearsed until my throat ached. The auditorium was packed, parents beaming at their children. I searched the crowd for my father, for Mark, for someone with Donovan blood who cared enough to show up. The seat was empty. I spoke to strangers. They arrived just as I stepped down, Dad's tie slightly askew, Mark carrying his briefcase. "Client emergency," Dad muttered, clapping my shoulder like it was a minor inconvenience, like missing one of the biggest moments of my life was no big deal. Mark smirked and said, "Guess we missed the boring part, huh?" My smile cracked right there, but no one noticed. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the gold tassel from my cap hanging on the doorknob. I had wanted a hug. "We're proud of you, Claire." Instead, all I heard was silence echoing louder than any applause I'd received. The years that followed only widened the canyon. Mark stayed at Dad's side, learning blueprints and payrolls, while I chased books and ideas. I wanted more than bricks and mortar. I wanted the world. At Ohio State, I studied international relations, diving into politics, culture, languages. I learned Arabic, fascinated by the rhythm and depth of it. While Mark wore suits to company dinners, I was buried in libraries, chasing a dream I couldn't yet name. And then, senior year, it came to me not as a whisper, but as a knock on a student center bulletin board. Lieutenant Karen Mitchell stood there, crisp in her Army uniform, speaking about service, challenge, purpose. She spoke of using language skills to bridge gaps in dangerous places, of missions that mattered, of being part of something larger than yourself. Something inside me lit up. I knew Mark and Dad would never understand. But for once, this wasn't about them. It was about me. The night I told them, Mark laughed out loud. The army? Claire, come on. You? You're not built for that. You think you can handle drills, mud, combat? Please, this is just another stunt to get Dad's attention. I swallowed the hurt and replied evenly. Not everything I do is about Dad, Mark. Some of us make choices because we believe in something. My. Dad's brow furrowed, torn between fear and pride. I thought I saw it flicker, just for a second. Are you sure about this, Claire? It's dangerous. It's a long road. I nodded. I'm sure. The morning I left for basic training, he hugged me tighter than I expected and whispered, Your mother would be proud. And then Mark, standing stiff as a board, shoved out his hand like we were business partners signing a deal. His eyes were cold. Don't come crawling back when you realize the real world chews you up. I slung my bag over my shoulder, heart pounding, throat tight. As the bus pulled away, I pressed my forehead to the window, watching the only home I'd ever known shrink behind me. Maybe, out there in the army, I'd finally find the respect that had always been denied to me. Maybe I'd finally matter. But I had no idea just how much blood, pain, and silence it would take. Basic training at Fort Benning, Georgia was nothing like the brochures. The first morning, a drill sergeant's roar jolted me awake at 4:30 a.m. His boots thundered against the floorboards as if he could shake the weakness out of us by sheer volume. Move it, recruits. This ain't summer camp. Within minutes, I was outside in the biting cold, dressed in fatigues that still smelled like plastic. My breath turned to steam as I stumbled into formation, the weight of the gear cutting into my shoulders. By the second week, blisters blossomed on my heels, my arms ached from push-ups, and my hair stuck to my scalp with sweat and grime. But I refused to quit. Every time I wanted to collapse, I remembered Mark's smirk, his words, "You're not built for this." Every time my legs shook during a 10-mile ruck march, I pictured Dad's eyes skimming over me at the dinner table. Every tear I swallowed turned into fuel. The army, for the first time in my life, gave me something I had never had. A level field. Nobody cared whose daughter I was. Nobody cared that I grew up in a small Ohio town where my brother was king. Here, the only thing that mattered was whether I could carry my weight, and I could. Still, the hardest part wasn't the mud or the cold. It was the silence after lights out, when I lay on my bunk staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet hum of 40 other women breathing. That's when the doubts crept in. What if Mark was right? What if I don't belong? One night, when those doubts felt loudest, someone sat down at the edge of my bunk. Can't sleep, Donovan? I looked up to see Captain Julia Harper. 10 years older than me, sharp-eyed. Steady. She had that kind of calm authority that made you want to stand straighter without her saying a word. I keep hearing my brother's voice, I admitted, surprising myself. He told me I wouldn't last. I guess part of me is scared he's right. Julia studied me for a long moment. Then she said quietly, Every soldier hears a voice like that. Some from family, some from inside their own head. The question isn't whether the voice is there. The question is whether you drown it out with action. Nah. Her words sank deep. From that night, she became more than just an officer to me. She became a mentor. A lifeline. Months blurred into a cycle of sweat, drills, and exhaustion, but beneath it all, a strength I didn't know I had was taking root. By the time I graduated, I wasn't the girl chasing her father's approval anymore. I was a soldier. And soon, the army would test me in ways I couldn't imagine. When I came home for a brief leave before deployment, I walked through the Donovan front door in uniform. The air smelled faintly of sawdust and coffee, the same as always. Dad looked older, lines carved deeper into his face, but his eyes lit up when he saw me. Claire, he breathed, as if he wasn't sure I was real. He hugged me tight longer than usual, and for a second I felt like a little girl again, safe in his arms. Mark leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. He let out a low whistle. Well, look at you. Playing dress-up. Got the boots and everything. I clenched my jaw. It's not dress-up, Mark. This is real. Real? He chuckled, shaking his head. Come on, you'll be back in a few months. This is just a phase. You couldn't even finish one summer on the soccer team without crying about shin splints. Dad shot him a warning glance. Enough, Mark. But the damage was done. My chest burned, and my throat tightened, but I refused to let Mark see me break. Instead, I stood taller, tugged at the edge of my jacket, and looked him dead in the eyes. You think I'm weak? Fine. Keep thinking that. But someday, when you're sitting behind your desk counting money, remember that while you were safe at home, I was out there protecting people who'll never know my name. Mark's smirk faltered, but only for a moment. Big talk, little sister. Duh. I turned to Dad, who was watching us both with an expression I couldn't read, half pride, half fear. I'm shipping out soon, I told him. His lips parted, like he wanted to argue, but then he just nodded slowly. I can't stop you, but I need you to promise me one thing, Claire. What's that? Come back. His voice cracked. Come back to me. I swallowed hard, forcing down the lump in my throat. I'll do everything I can, Dad. But the truth? The army doesn't hand out promises. The day I left, the bus idled outside the recruitment center. Other families clustered around, hugging their children, snapping pictures. Dad hugged me so tight I thought my ribs might crack, whispering, Your mom would be proud. Then it was Mark's turn. He didn't hug me. He didn't even step forward. He just stuck out his hand again, stiff as ever. Don't say I didn't warn you, he muttered. I shook his hand, stared into those cold eyes, and realized something. I wasn't leaving home just to serve my country. I was leaving to finally escape the shadow of being Richard Donovan's forgotten daughter and Mark Donovan's little sister. As the bus pulled away, Ohio shrinking in the distance, a fierce determination settled in my chest. Whatever waited for me out there, mud, bullets, blood, I would face it head on. Because if I didn't prove myself now, I never would. Fort Benning was hell. And hell had a schedule. Every day began at 4:30 a.m., with the same thunderous roar of drill sergeants tearing through the barracks like hurricanes. By the time the sun cracked over the pine trees of Georgia, I had already run 5 miles, carried 70 pounds on my back, and wondered a dozen times if my legs would simply give out and snap. I was blistered, bruised, and bone-tired. My arms shook so violently after push-ups that I sometimes had to hold my tray with both hands in the mess hall, soup sloshing over the edge. The other recruits laughed, some pitying, some cruel, but I never quit. Every insult, every barked order, every aching muscle, I fed them into the furnace inside me. I remembered Mark's smirk, the way he spat. You're not built for this. His voice became the weight on my shoulders. Every time I lifted, every time I ran, I lifted and ran against him. And slowly, I started to change. I wasn't the invisible girl anymore. I was a soldier. The hardest part wasn't the physical grind, it was the mental war. At night, when the lights went out, silence wrapped around me like a shroud. I'd lie there in the dark, the ceiling fan humming, and memories would crawl out of the shadows. Dad nodding past me at the dinner table, Mark sneering, the empty chair at my graduation. Those memories weighed more than the gear on my back. One night, when the ghosts were louder than usual, I felt the edge of my mattress sink. Can't sleep, Donovan? A calm voice asked. I turned my head. Standing there, half-shadowed by moonlight, was Captain Julia Harper. 10 years older, her face bore the calm confidence of someone who had already survived storms I couldn't yet imagine. I keep hearing my brother's voice, I whispered, surprising myself with the honesty. Telling me I'm weak. That I'll never make it. Julia studied me, arms folded, eyes sharp but not unkind. Then she crouched so we were eye level. Let me tell you something, Claire. Every soldier carries a voice like that. Some it's family, some it's their own doubts. The question isn't if the voice is there. The question is, do you drown it out with action? Her words cut through me, slicing clean into the marrow. Something in me hardened that night. I decided Mark's voice would never be louder than mine. Julia became more than an officer, she became my anchor. She saw things in me no one had ever noticed. My sharpness with languages, the way I analyzed situations instead of just reacting. During one exercise, our squad was tasked with navigating through swampy terrain at night. Others stumbled, cursed, panicked when they lost bearings. I traced the stars above, cross-checking with the map, quietly guiding the group until we reached the checkpoint. Julia caught my arm after. "Good instincts," she said simply. "Rare combination brains and guts. Don't lose it." Those words lit me up brighter than any praise I'd ever gotten from Dad. For once, someone wasn't comparing me to Mark. Someone saw me. The months dragged and blurred into sweat, bruises, and exhaustion, crawling under barbed wire while live rounds cracked overhead. Gas chamber drills that seared my lungs. Nights so cold my teeth chattered until dawn. But there were moments of pride too, like the first time I beat half the men in my platoon in the obstacle course, scaling the rope faster than I ever thought possible. Their shocked faces fueled me. "Didn't think the little bookworm could do it, huh?" I muttered under my breath, tasting victory sweeter than any medal. I carried every bruise home in my heart like proof. I was not invisible anymore. Graduation day came. Standing at attention in the field, uniform crisp, boots polished, I felt taller than I ever had in my life. The national anthem echoed, flags snapping in the breeze, and tears pricked my eyes not from weakness, but from the knowledge that I had earned my place here. Dad came. His suit was a little wrinkled, his eyes tired, but when he hugged me after the ceremony, I felt something break inside me. "Claire," he murmured, voice rough. "Your mother would have been proud." Those words should have filled me with joy. But then I saw Mark. He stood a few feet away, arms crossed, mouth curled into that same crooked smirk. "Nice show," he said. "But parades don't win wars. Let's see how long you last when it's not just marching and salutes." The sting was instant, like salt in an open wound. But instead of answering, I held his gaze until he looked away. For the first time, Mark flinched. I thought that was the end of the test, but I was wrong. Basic training was just the doorway. The Army had other plans for me. Because of my language skills and top performance, I was selected for specialized training in military intelligence. Julia told me herself, her hand on my shoulder. "This won't be easy, Donovan. It's not just codes and reports. It's lives depending on what you see, what you don't miss. You ready for that weight?" I looked her dead in the eye. "I've been carrying weight my whole life. I can handle it." She smiled faintly. "We'll see." And with that, my path veered away from anything I had ever imagined. What I didn't know then was that this path would lead me straight into fire, blood, and a night on the other side of the world that would change me forever. When you serve in military intelligence, most days don't look like the movies. It's hours of analyzing signals, cross-checking patterns, piecing together fragments of information until you can see the shape of a threat. But every so often, there's a mission that burns itself into your bones forever. Mine came 2 years into my service. We were stationed near the Afghanistan-Pakistan border, a remote outpost tucked between jagged mountains and dust-choked valleys. The air smelled of sand and diesel. Days were scorching, nights cold enough to bite through your skin. We were a 6-person team, small, efficient, invisible to the world. Captain Julia Harper was there, of course. My anchor, my mentor. She led us with a calm intensity that steadied even the most nervous recruit. If Julia said we could handle it, I believed her. Our assignment was simple on paper. Confirm intelligence about a high-value target's secret meeting. Nothing flashy, just eyes, ears, and silence. Get in, get proof, get out. But missions have a way of laughing at simplicity. The attack came just before dawn. I woke to the thunder of explosions ripping through the compound, the walls vibrating like they might crumble on top of us. Dust and smoke filled my lungs before I even sat up. My ears rang, a high-pitched scream blotting out everything. "Contact! Contact!" someone yelled, but the words felt muffled, as if underwater. Then the gunfire started. Not sporadic, but a steady hail bullets chewing through sandbags, ricocheting off metal, shredding the fragile sense of safety we had built. I scrambled for my gear, heart pounding so hard it drowned out my fear. My hands shook, but training took over. I grabbed my rifle, my vest, my helmet, and threw myself into the chaos. The world outside was a storm of dust and fire. Enemy fighters poured from the ridges, their silhouettes flashing against the rising sun. Our team returned fire. But we were outnumbered 3-1. And then the second blast hit. The ground convulsed beneath me, a deafening roar swallowing my scream. Shards of metal tore through the air. The small command hut collapsed, a cloud of debris swallowing everything. When the dust settled enough for me to see, I spotted Julia pinned under a heavy beam, her face twisted in pain. "Leave me," she barked, her voice sharp despite the blood streaming down her temple. "That's a direct order, Donovan." But I couldn't. Not after everything she had given me. Not after the nights she kept me from drowning in my doubts. Not after she taught me that I was more than Mark's shadow. "With all due respect, ma'am," I shouted over the gunfire, "I'm not leaving you here." That. I dropped my rifle, ignoring the bullets snapping past my head, and clawed at the beam with bleeding hands. My muscles screamed, my ribs felt like they'd crack, but I pushed harder. Finally, with one last surge, the beam shifted enough for her to drag herself out. "Claire," she began, but her words were drowned by another explosion, closer this time. I didn't think. I just moved. I threw myself over her as the blast tore through us. Something hot and sharp punched into my back and leg. The pain was white, searing, almost holy in its intensity. My breath left me in a rush. And for a second the world tilted, colors draining. But I held on. The next thing I remember is lying on the ground, half-conscious, vision flickering in and out. Julia's face hovered above mine, blurred and desperate. "Stay with me, Donovan. Stay with me." I wanted to answer, but blood bubbled in my throat. My chest ached with every shallow gasp. Boots thundered around us rescue, voices shouting, hands dragging me onto a stretcher, the whine of a helicopter overhead. As the blades roared, darkness closed in. My last clear thought before slipping under was Mark's voice. "You'll never make it," echoing cruelly in my head. And then Julia's voice cutting through it, fierce and steady. "You already did." I woke up 3 days later in a sterile white room in Germany. Tubes snaked from my arms. Monitors beeped beside me. My body felt like it had been set on fire and put out with gravel. 3 ribs broken. A punctured lung. Shrapnel lodged deep in my back and left leg. A traumatic brain injury from the blast impact. The doctors told me I was lucky to be alive. Lucky. That word tasted bitter. Lucky meant I could never run without pain again. Lucky meant migraines would stalk me for the rest of my life. Lucky meant scars I could hide under clothes, but never erase from memory. Julia visited me when she could, her arm in a sling, her face bruised but alive. She sat by my bed and took my hand. "You saved my life," she said simply, her voice breaking for the first time I'd ever heard. And more than that, the intel we gathered before the attack was gold. It led to one of the most important operations in the past decade. "You changed the game, Claire." Life. Tears stung my eyes, but not from pride. From the cruel irony that none of it would ever be public. A week later, she came again, this time carrying a small black box. She placed it on the blanket across my lap. Inside was a medal, one of the nation's highest honors. But there were no cameras. No crowd. No applause. Just Julia, a colonel, and me. "This ceremony is classified," Julia explained, her eyes steady on mine. "No one outside certain circles will ever know. Not even your family. Do you understand?" I stared at the metal gleaming cold under the fluorescent light. My chest tightened. "So to the world, I'm just another soldier with an honorable discharge." Julia nodded slowly. "Yes, but to those who matter, you are a hero." I closed the box. My hands shook. I told myself I didn't need recognition. But a part of me, the part that had stood on that graduation stage, staring at an empty chair, ached for anyone to see me. That night, alone in my hospital bed, I whispered into the darkness, "Dad, I wish you knew." But he didn't. Neither did Mark. And I had no way of telling them. 6 months. That's how long it took before I could walk without someone holding me up like a child learning for the first time. Recovery wasn't noble or cinematic. It was humiliating. I'd wake in the hospital drenched in sweat from nightmares, my body jerking as if it were still under fire. Nurses would find me gasping, hands clenched around phantom weapons. My left leg felt like it was filled with molten lead shrapnel too deep to remove. My chest burned every time I tried to take a full breath, a cruel reminder of the punctured lung. And then there were the headaches. They hit like lightning, sudden and merciless, turning the world into a strobe of pain. Doctors called it post-traumatic brain injury. To me, it felt like punishment for surviving. Everyone said, "You're lucky." No. Lucky? Lucky meant the migraines could knock me flat for hours. Lucky meant I had to relearn balance, tripping like a drunk every time I stood too fast. Lucky meant scars spiderwebbing across my back, souvenirs from an explosion no one outside my unit would ever hear about. One gray afternoon, Julia Harper came into my hospital room. She carried that small black box again. "You need to accept this, Claire," she said gently, setting it on the table beside me. I stared at it. What's the point? No one's allowed to know. My dad will never see it. Mark will laugh if I tell him. Julia's eyes softened. This isn't about them. It's about the truth. You risked everything. You saved me. You saved the team. And you helped make an operation possible that will never be printed in a newspaper. This, she tapped the box, is proof that even in silence, your sacrifice mattered. With trembling hands, I opened it. The metal gleamed under the fluorescent lights, cold, heavy, and utterly lonely. I wanted to feel pride. I wanted to cry with joy. Instead, all I felt was emptiness. Because what is recognition if it's trapped in a box no one will ever open? Weeks turned into months. Physical therapy consumed my days. Endless reps with resistance bands, water therapy, learning how to jog again on a treadmill that beeped every time my heart rate spiked. I gritted my teeth, sweat pouring down my face, refusing to let anyone see me break. At night, the quiet was louder than gunfire. I'd lie awake in my hospital bed, staring at the ceiling, haunted by two voices. Mark's, "You'll never last," and Julia's, "You already did." Lie. I clung to hers, but has always found a way to crawl back. The Army handled my case delicately. My medical discharge papers were worded vaguely. Every detail about the mission scrubbed clean. "Injuries sustained during service," was all they said. No explosions. No rescues. No blood on the sand. Even the Veterans Affairs Department couldn't see the full record. To them, I was just another soldier who'd served honorably, nothing more. That cut deeper than the shrapnel, because when I looked in the mirror, I didn't see just another soldier. I saw the burns, the scars, the leg that would never run the same. I saw the nights I woke choking on phantom smoke. I saw proof of battles no one else would ever acknowledge. One day, Julia visited again. She had been promoted Major Harper now, but she still spoke to me like I mattered. "Claire," she said, sitting on the edge of my bed. "I know this is hard. Invisible wounds always are. But I need you to remember something. Recognition doesn't define worth. You did your job. You saved lives. Whether or not the world knows doesn't change the truth." Her words were meant to heal. Instead, they split me open. I whispered, "But what about my dad? What about the way he's always looked at me like I was less? He'll never know what I did. Mark will keep sneering and I'll keep being the invisible Donovan." Julia squeezed my hand. "Your father might know more than you think. And as for Mark, he doesn't get to define you anymore. You've proven yourself in ways he can't even imagine." Tears finally spilled, hot and unrelenting. For years I had held them back, swallowing disappointment until it calcified. But in that moment, with Julia's steady hand over mine, I let them fall. When the day of my official discharge came, I walked out of the hospital into the cold German air with a limp and a box in my bag that no one would ever see. Soldiers saluted as I passed, but to the world beyond the gates, I was just another face in the crowd. 8 years of service, sealed behind classified codes. 8 years of blood, sweat, and sacrifice, erased in the name of national security. I told myself I didn't need parades. I told myself I didn't need applause. But deep down, the girl who once stood on that graduation stage looking for her father in an empty chair still lived inside me, still aching for someone to say, "I see you, Claire. I'm proud." That night, on the flight back to the States, I pressed my forehead against the window. The stars stretched endless across the sky, cold and unreachable. Somewhere down there, my father was aging without me. My brother was thriving in the company that would never have my name on it, and I was returning home with scars hidden under my clothes and a medal I couldn't show. I whispered to myself, a vow only the night could hear. They may never know, but I know. And one day, they will see me whether they want to or not. Coming home was supposed to feel like relief. Instead, it felt like exile. 8 years in the army had drilled structure into my bones. Wake at dawn, run until your lungs burned. Mission, debrief, repeat. Now, suddenly, I was free, too free. The choices that other people took for granted, what to wear, when to eat, where to go, paralyzed me. Civilian life felt like stepping into a world that no longer had edges. I rented a small apartment 20 minutes from my father's house, a plain box with beige walls that smelled faintly of mildew. The silence inside it was deafening. No boots stomping down hallways. No orders. No team breathing beside me in the dark. Just me, my limp, and the quiet reminder that I no longer belonged anywhere. The Department of Veterans Affairs tried to help, but their support stopped at paperwork. They had no idea about the migraines that ripped through my skull without warning, or the nightmares that jolted me awake, sweat soaking the sheets. They didn't know, couldn't know, because those details were locked behind classified walls. So I carried them alone. The first time I saw Dad again, my breath caught in my throat. He opened the door slowly, leaning heavier on the frame than I remembered. His once broad shoulders had narrowed, his hair gone grayer, his skin drawn. Time had carved deep lines into his face, but when his eyes landed on me, they lit up in a way I had never seen before. Claire. His voice cracked on my name. For a moment, we just stood there, father and daughter, strangers and family all at once. Then he pulled me into his arms. His chest felt thinner, his grip weaker, but the warmth was still there. You look strong, he said, stepping back to study me. I'm trying, I answered. My smile trembled. Inside, the house was both familiar and foreign. The same old recliner sat by the window, but dust gathered on its arms. The scent of sawdust and fresh coffee was weaker now, replaced by the faint medicinal tang of pills. Dad lowered himself onto the couch with a sigh. Doctor says I've got to take it easy. Heart's not what it used to be. I nodded, throat tightening. The man who once seemed unbreakable, who carried whole beams on his shoulders at job sites, now looked fragile. We talked for hours. About the company, about Mom, about little memories he had never shared. For the first time in my life, it felt like he was truly looking at me, not through me, not past me. Just me. Mark didn't come. For weeks, he didn't call, didn't show, didn't acknowledge that I was home. When I asked Dad, he said, "He's busy, Claire, running the business. 2 kids now, you know. Big house in Westfield. Busy. Always busy." But I knew the truth. Mark wasn't busy, he was avoiding me. The first time we finally crossed paths was at Dad's Sunday dinner. I had been helping in the kitchen, chopping vegetables while Dad told me stories about Mom's favorite recipes. The door swung open, and Mark strode in with Samantha on his arm and their 2 children trailing behind, dressed in matching sweaters. "Claire," Samantha said politely, offering me a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Mark, on the other hand, barely looked at me. His gaze flicked over my limp, the scar peeking from under my sleeve, and then he smirked like he had 8 years ago. "Well," he drawled, sliding into a chair, "look who decided to come back." The words stung more than I wanted them to, but I forced myself to sit at the table, to endure. Dinner was civil at first, talk of the company, the kids' school, the weather, but the air shifted when Dad mentioned how much he appreciated my help around the house. "She's been driving me to appointments," Dad said, smiling at me. "Even looked over some contracts for me. Sharp eye, this one." Mark set down his fork with a clatter. "Contracts? Dad, come on. Claire doesn't know the first thing about construction. She's been gone nearly a decade, playing soldier. You can't seriously think she understands the business." My hands clenched under the table. Dad's face hardened. "Your sister served this country with honor. Don't dismiss her like that." The room froze. Mark's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing. He opened his mouth to retort, but Samantha's hand on his arm stopped him. I swallowed my anger, but inside my chest burned. I had faced gunfire, bombs, blood, but nothing cut like being diminished by your own brother in front of your father. After dinner, I stepped outside onto the porch, the cool night air stinging my lungs. Stars scattered above, silent witnesses to the storm inside me. Dad joined me, moving slower than before. He lowered himself onto the swing beside me. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "For what?" My voice cracked. "For not seeing you sooner." He stared at his hands, calloused even now. "Mark was always loud, always in my ear. You were quieter. I thought you didn't need me as much. I was wrong." My throat closed. I blinked back tears, but one escaped anyway. "Dad," I whispered. "All I ever wanted was for you to see me." He turned, his eyes wet. "I see you now, Claire. I should have seen you all along." For the first time, his words felt like more than a courtesy. They felt like truth. But Mark's glare from across the dinner table still lingered in my mind. He wasn't done. I could feel it. His pride, his entitlement, they wouldn't let him accept my presence quietly. And as much as I wanted peace, I knew deep down, the real battle with Mark hadn't even begun. If there's one thing the army taught me, it's that battles don't always start with bullets. Sometimes, they start with words. And sometimes, words cut deeper. Dinner at Dad's house became a routine. Every Sunday, I'd cook with him, help set the table, and pretend just for a few hours that we were a normal family again. But every time Mark showed up, that illusion shattered. He'd strut in with Samantha on his arm, wearing cufflinks like he was a CEO of a Fortune 500, not the heir of a construction company he didn't build. He'd pat Dad's back with fake warmth, hug his kids like a show for the neighbors, then shoot me that smirk that said, "You don't belong here." I tried to ignore it. I tried to focus on Dad. But ignoring Mark was like ignoring a storm. You could pretend all you wanted. But eventually, it was going to break. The breaking point came one evening in early spring. We were seated around the dining table, roast chickens steaming between us, the kids giggling about school. Dad looked tired, paler than usual, but he smiled as he watched us. "Claire's been helping me with the company records," he said casually, carving the chicken. "Sharp with numbers. She caught a mistake in the budget last week that saved us a good deal." Mark's fork froze midair. He slowly set it down and leaned back in his chair. "Wait, you're letting her look at the company books?" Dad glanced at him. "Why not?" "Because she doesn't know the first damn thing about running a business." Mark's voice dripped with disdain. "She's been gone for 8 years, Dad. Marching around in the desert doesn't make you qualified to balance payroll." Heat rushed to my cheeks. I clenched my fists under the table. "I wasn't just marching around, Mark," I said evenly. "I was serving this country. I managed teams. I handled intelligence. I made decisions that saved lives." He scoffed. "Yeah, decisions like which MRE tastes worse, chili mac or beef stew." The kids laughed, not understanding the venom behind the words. My chest tightened. "Enough," Dad said sharply. His fork clattered against his plate. His voice carried a weight that silenced even the children. But Mark wasn't finished. He leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "Dad, she's trying to worm her way in. First the books, then the meetings. What's next? You going to hand her the company because she played soldier long enough to guilt you into it?" My heart slammed against my ribs. I opened my mouth to fire back, but Dad beat me to it. "Mark." His voice was low, dangerous. "Watch your mouth." Mark blinked. "What?" "For years, I've listened to you talk over your sister, dismiss her, belittle her. I kept quiet because I thought she could handle it. But not anymore. Claire's done more with her life than you can even comprehend. She bled for this country. She damn near died for it. So if she wants to look at the books, she's earned that right 100 times over." The room went silent. Even Samantha's fork stilled, her eyes darting nervously between us. For the first time in my life, my father stood up for me. And for the first time in his life, Mark looked stunned. His mouth opened, closed, then tightened into a thin line. "Unbelievable," he muttered, pushing back his chair. "She's got you wrapped around her finger. Fine. Let her play accountant. Let's see how long it takes before she screws it up." He stormed out, Samantha scrambling after him, their kids trailing behind with wide, confused eyes. The front door slammed so hard the walls rattled. I sat frozen, my chest heaving. My father's words replayed in my head, each one a balm on wounds I had carried for decades. You damn near died for this country. He saw me. Finally, he saw me. I turned to him, my voice barely a whisper. You really believe that, Dad? His eyes softened. I should have told you sooner. I should have told you 1,000 times. But yes, Claire, I believe it. I'm proud of you. The tears came before I could stop them. Hot, unrelenting. Years of silence breaking all at once. I covered my face, ashamed. But Dad reached across the table and gripped my hand. Don't hide from me, he said gently. Not anymore. That night, I lay awake in my apartment, staring at the medal hidden in the drawer by my bed. For the first time, it didn't feel like just a secret weight. For the first time, it felt like proof that I wasn't crazy to want recognition. Proof that maybe, someday, the truth would come out. But even as relief washed through me, I knew Mark wasn't done. I had seen the fire in his eyes as he left the table. Jealousy, rage, fear. My father's words had planted a seed of war between brother and sister. And war, I knew too well, only grows. I didn't know my father kept secrets. Not from me, not anymore. But I should have guessed because a man who builds an empire from nothing always plans for the day he won't be there to run it. It started with quiet conversations. One evening, Dad invited me into his study. The room smelled of leather and old paper, the oak desk scarred from years of use. Sunlight filtered through the blinds, striping his tired face. Claire, he said, motioning for me to sit. I want you to start learning more about the company. Not just the books. Everything. Contracts. Negotiations. Clients. I hesitated. Dad, are you sure? Mark. He cut me off, sharp. Mark has had his chance. He's good at making noise, not at listening. A business needs ears as much as it needs a voice. You listen. You see things. The words stunned me. For decades, I had been invisible to him. And now, here he was, telling me I saw what others missed. I swallowed hard. I'll try not to disappoint you. You won't, he said firmly. The weeks that followed were strange. Dad and I spent long evenings at the kitchen table, papers spread out, his hand shaking slightly as he pointed to numbers, explaining strategies. He looked older, yes, but also lighter, as if teaching me gave him purpose. Mark noticed. He started showing up unannounced at the office, lingering in doorways, his eyes narrowing when he saw me in meetings. He'd crack jokes about soldier girl playing businesswoman, but his smile never reached his eyes. One night after a meeting, he cornered me in the parking lot. What are you doing, Claire? His voice was low, venomous. Learning, I said simply. From Dad, or about Dad? He stepped closer, his breath hot with anger. You think because you played hero overseas, you get to come home and steal what I've been building with him for years? I froze. I'm not stealing anything. Dad asked me. Dad doesn't know what he's doing anymore, Mark snapped. He's old, sick, easy to manipulate. You're just waiting for him to keel over so you can swoop in, aren't you? The words sliced through me. Before I could respond, headlights swept across the lot. And Dad's car pulled up. Mark stepped back, mask snapping into place. He plastered on a smile as Dad rolled down the window. Everything all right? Dad asked. Just catching up with Claire, Mark said smoothly. You know how siblings are. I clenched my fists, biting my tongue. A week later, Dad called me into the study again. This time, a lawyer was with him. Claire, Dad began, his voice steady but soft. I've made some changes to my will. The company it's going to you, 51%. Mark will still have a stake, but you'll have control. The room spun. Dad, are you sure? He'll hate me for this. He already does, Dad said bluntly. But this isn't about him. It's about the company. About legacy. Mark sees profit. You see, people. That's what will keep Donovan Construction alive long after I'm gone. Tears stung my eyes. I don't know if I'm ready. You will be, he said, squeezing my hand. His grip was weak, but his eyes burned with certainty. "Promise me, Claire. Promise you'll take care of it." My voice broke. "I promise." I didn't tell Mark. God knows, he would have burned the house down before letting me have a piece of it. But secrets have a way of bleeding through cracks. He started asking questions about Dad's meetings, about the lawyer's visits. He grew sharper, his jokes crueler, his eyes harder. And then, it happened. It was a Tuesday morning. I was at the apartment, sipping bitter coffee when my phone rang. The hospital. By the time I arrived, it was too late. Heart attack, they said. Sudden. Nothing they could do. I stood in the cold, sterile hallway, staring at the pale sheet pulled over his body. My legs gave out. I slid down the wall, gasping like I'd been punched in the chest. All the years I had begged for his attention, all the tears I had swallowed, all the anger I had carried, they meant nothing now, because the one person who had finally seen me was gone. I pressed my forehead to my knees, choking on sobs. The promise I made to him echoed in my skull. "Take care of it, Claire." But how? How was I supposed to face Mark now? At the funeral, the church overflowed. Business associates, neighbors, old friends, they all spoke of Richard Donovan as a giant of the community. A builder. A man of strength and vision. I sat in the front pew, my hands trembling, my eyes raw. I wanted to remember him as my father, the man who taught me to ride a bike, who smelled of sawdust and coffee, who, at the end, finally told me he was proud. But every time I looked across the aisle, I saw Mark. Standing tall, greeting mourners with practiced charm, playing the role of grieving son. His arm draped around Samantha, his voice warm as he shook hands. And when our eyes met, there was no grief there, only fire. After the service, he cornered me again, his tone dripping with poison. "He changed the will, didn't he?" My stomach dropped. "What are you talking about?" "Don't play dumb," he hissed. "I saw the lawyer coming and going. You think I don't know? You think I won't fight you for every last brick of this company?" His breath was hot against my ear. "This isn't over, Claire. It's just starting." He walked away before I could answer, leaving me trembling in the shadows of the church. That night, I sat by the window of my apartment, staring out at the dark streets of Ohio. The medal lay on the table beside Dad's will, both symbols of things I couldn't show the world. I whispered into the night, voice breaking. "Dad, I don't know if I'm strong enough." But deep inside, I felt it, that same fire that had carried me through the battlefield, through pain and blood. Mark wanted war, and I wasn't going to run this time. Funerals are supposed to be about grief, about saying goodbye, but my father's funeral felt more like a stage, and my brother was the star actor. The church overflowed with people. Business partners in dark suits, neighbors clutching tissues, workers from Donovan Construction who spoke of Dad as the man who gave me my first paycheck. The air was thick with flowers, lilies, roses, their sweetness almost suffocating. I sat in the front pew, my black dress heavy on my shoulders, hands clenched in my lap. My chest still ached from crying, but my tears had run dry. All I had left was a hollow ache where my father's voice should have been. The coffin rested at the front, draped in a simple white cloth. I wanted to remember Dad in his workshop, sawdust on his shirt, laughter rumbling from his chest. Instead, all I could see was wood polished so smooth it reflected the overhead lights. When it was Mark's turn to speak, he rose slowly, every step deliberate, his expression carved from grief or what he wanted the world to think was grief. He gripped the podium, voice trembling just enough to sound authentic. "My father was my hero," he began, his gaze sweeping the crowd. "He taught me everything I know about building, about hard work, about responsibility. He believed in me, and I will carry his vision forward." People dabbed their eyes, heads nodded. Some whispered, "What a fine son." I wanted to scream, because I knew the truth. Mark hadn't been by Dad's side when he grew weak. He hadn't been the one driving him to doctor appointments, sitting with him late at night, sorting through the endless paperwork. That was me. I had been there. Me. But no one in that church cared. Mark paused, his eyes glistening just enough to sparkle under the stained glass light. Then he looked at me. Right at me. And for a flicker of a second, his mask slipped. His lips curled into a smirk so small only I could see it. The message was clear. This is my show. You don't belong here. After the service, the crowd spilled into the churchyard. People surrounded Mark, patting his back, shaking his hand, telling him how proud his father would be. Samantha clung to his arm. Their children nestled close, completing the perfect picture of a grieving family. And me? I stood alone by the steps, the chill March wind biting through my thin coat. A few people offered me polite nods, murmured, "Sorry for your loss," before drifting back to Mark like moths to a flame. One man, a former foreman from Dad's company, stopped long enough to shake my hand. "Your brother's going to do great things with the business," he said warmly. "Richard would be proud." My stomach twisted. I forced a tight smile, but inside, rage burned hot. Proud of Mark? Proud of the man who only cared for profit? Proud of the son who had mocked his sister until her spirit cracked? I wanted to shout, "It was me! I was the one Dad trusted. I was the one he believed in at the end, not him." But I couldn't. Not yet. Later, at the graveside, the casket lowered into the earth. I knelt, fingers clutching the damp soil. My heart felt like it was being buried with him. "Goodbye, Dad," I whispered, my voice breaking. "Thank you for finally seeing me. I'll keep my promise. I'll protect what you built, even if I have to fight Mark to the bitter end." A shadow fell across me. I looked up to see Mark standing there, his hands folded neatly, his expression solemn for the crowd behind us. But his eyes, those cold, calculating eyes, were locked on mine. He leaned down just enough so only I could hear. "Enjoy your little moment, Claire. Because when the will is read, everything changes. And I'll make sure they all see you for what you really are. Nothing." He straightened, plastered on another mask of grief, and turned to embrace yet another mourner. I stayed by the grave long after everyone else left. The sun dipped low, casting the headstones in long shadows. My breath came in shuddering gasps. My hands shook with fury. I had faced enemy fire. I had bled on foreign soil. But nothing, not bombs, not bullets, hurt as much as being erased in front of my own community. Mark thought he had won. He thought the stage was his, that the applause would last forever. But the will hadn't been read yet. And when it was, the truth would finally rip through his lies like a grenade in his perfect little theater. The county courthouse smelled of old wood and dust, the kind that clung to your throat. Sunlight spilled through tall windows, catching on the brass fixtures. But the light did nothing to ease the heaviness pressing on my chest. I sat at the front, hands clasped tight in my lap, the black folder containing Dad's will resting on the polished oak table. My pulse hammered so loud I could hear it in my ears. Mark sat across from me, dressed in an expensive navy suit, cufflinks gleaming. He looked every inch the confident heir, his wife Samantha at his side, her hand resting lightly on his arm like a silent show of support. His smirk, God, that smirk hadn't left his face since he walked in. The lawyer cleared his throat. "We're here to read the last will and testament of Richard Donovan." His voice echoed in the chamber, formal and steady. The words blurred until one sentence cut through the air like a blade. "I, Richard Donovan, leave controlling interest 51% of Donovan Construction to my daughter Claire Donovan." A gasp rippled through the room. My stomach lurched. I had known it was coming, but hearing it spoken aloud, hearing my father's faith in me etched into law, stole the breath from my lungs. Mark shot to his feet, his chair scraping violently against the floor. "This is a joke," his voice thundered, filling every corner of the courtroom. "My father would never hand his company to her. Never." The lawyer raised a hand. "Mr. Donovan, please." But Mark wasn't listening. He jabbed a finger at me, his face red with fury. "She manipulated him. She played the grieving daughter, whispered in his ear, made him think she was worthy. But she's not. She's nothing but a fraud." My body went cold. "Mark," I began, my voice shaking. He cut me off, his words venomous. "You think anyone believes you? You disappeared for years, Claire. Years. Off playing soldier in God knows where. And now you come back, limping, flashing scars, expecting us to believe you were some kind of hero? Please, You couldn't even finish a soccer season in high school without crying. Laughter rippled from the back of the room, sharp, cruel. My cheeks burned. My throat tightened until I could barely breathe. Mark spread his arms wide, his voice booming like a preacher at a revival. This woman, this pathetic excuse for a daughter, has no right to my father's legacy. She's not strong enough, she's not smart enough, and she damn sure didn't earn it. The humiliation was suffocating. I felt myself shrinking, my father's faith in me crumbling under the weight of Mark's words. And then, the doors at the back of the courtroom creaked open. Boots clicked against the marble floor, steady, deliberate. A figure stepped forward, tall, composed, dressed in uniform. Major Julia Harper. Gasps rippled through the room as she strode to the front, her eyes locked on mine. My heart lurched. She stopped by the lawyer's desk, pulled a sealed envelope from her briefcase, and set it down with a heavy thud. "Your Honor," she said firmly, her voice carrying across the room. "I am here to submit classified documentation, recently declassified for this proceeding. It pertains directly to Claire Donovan's service record." The judge's brows shot up. "Proceed." "No." Mark's face drained of color. "What the hell is this?" Julia turned, her gaze sharp as steel. "The truth." The judge slid open the envelope, pulling out thick, stamped papers. The silence in the courtroom was electric. Every eye locked on the flutter of pages. He read aloud, voice deliberate. "Sergeant Claire Donovan, awarded the Distinguished Service Cross for extraordinary heroism in action, sustained life-threatening injuries while saving the lives of multiple soldiers, including her commanding officer, during a covert operation overseas." The words reverberated through the chamber. Gasps erupted. Whispers swept like wildfire. Hero. Medal. Distinguished Service Cross. My hands shook. Tears stung my eyes. After all these years, after hiding, after bleeding in silence, the truth was out. I looked at Mark. His mouth hung open, his face pale. For once, he had no words. The judge set the papers down and fixed him with a hard stare. "Mr. Donovan, do you still wish to contest your father's will on the grounds that your sister is unworthy?" Mark's lips trembled, but no sound came out. I inhaled, my chest aching, and forced myself to my feet. My voice wavered, but it carried. "My father saw me," I said quietly. "He trusted me, and whether you believe it or not, I will honor that trust. I'm not here to steal anything. I'm here because I earned it with blood, with scars, with sacrifice you will never understand." The silence that followed was thick, heavy, final. The gavel struck once, sharp and resounding. The will stands. Control of Donovan Construction passes to Claire Donovan. Matt. I closed my eyes, a sob catching in my throat. Not just for the victory, but for the vindication. For the empty chair at my graduation. For the nights in Germany with my medal hidden in a drawer. For the promise I made at Dad's grave. When I opened them, Julia was watching me, her eyes warm, steady. She nodded once, a silent reminder. You drowned out the voice. And in that moment, for the first time in my life, I wasn't invisible. The courtroom emptied slowly, voices buzzing like a hive, but none of them reached me. I sat frozen at the table, heart hammering, Julia's words and the judge's ruling still echoing in my head. For years, my service had been a ghost, erased, silenced, dismissed even in my own family. And now, in black ink and official record, the truth had been spoken aloud. I was a soldier. I was a hero. And for once, everyone knew it. But victory never comes clean. Mark stayed behind after most had gone. His face pale, eyes unfocused. He looked like a man who'd been gutted, his pride spilling out on the floor. Samantha hovered at his side, whispering urgently, but he shook her off, staggering toward me. You think this changes anything? His voice was raw, hoarse, stripped of its usual polish. You think a few papers erase who you are? You're still weak. You're still nothing. But the venom didn't land. His words cracked, hollow. I stood slowly, my limp heavy but steady. You can call me weak, Mark. You can laugh, you can sneer. But the difference between us is simple. I don't need anyone's lies to stand. You do. His jaw tightened. His fists curled. For a moment, I thought he might actually strike me, but then his shoulders slumped, his fire sputtering into smoke. The judge's gavel had ended the legal war. But the emotional war lingered. In the weeks that followed, the town buzzed with whispers. Articles ran in the local paper. Heroic service of local veteran revealed during inheritance battle. Neighbors who once looked through me now stopped me on the street, shaking my hand, thanking me. But it all tasted bitter, because none of it came from the people who mattered most. One evening, I went to Dad's grave. The sky was overcast, the wind sharp against my skin. I knelt in the damp grass, tracing his name carved into the stone. "Dad, I did it," I whispered. "They know now. They finally see me." My voice cracked. "But you're not here to see it." Tears blurred my vision. The ache in my chest was worse than any wound I'd carried. Behind me, footsteps crunched on gravel. I turned. Mark stood a few feet away, hands shoved deep in his pockets. His face shadowed. I braced myself. He didn't speak at first, just stared at the stone, jaw working. Finally, he said, almost to himself, "I didn't know." My breath caught. "Didn't know what?" That you went through all that." His voice faltered. "I thought you were pretending. Trying to one-up me. I thought—" He shook his head. "I don't know what I thought anymore." Anger flared in me, hot and sharp. "You didn't know because you didn't want to. You never wanted to see me, Mark. Not once." His eyes lifted, meeting mine. For the first time, I saw fear there, not of me, but of the truth. "You got what you wanted," he said bitterly. "The company, the glory, Dad's approval, congratulations." "It's not about that," I snapped. "It was never about that. I didn't want to take anything from you. I just wanted to be seen, to be loved like you were." Silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Finally, Mark muttered, "Maybe I don't know how to do that." He turned and walked away, his shoulders slumped, his steps uneven. I watched him go, my chest aching with something I couldn't name. I had won, but it felt like losing too. At the office, control of Donovan Construction shifted to me. Contracts crossed my desk. Employees looked to me for direction. Decisions weighed heavy on my shoulders. Some doubted me at first, whispers of, "She's just the veteran. She won because of sympathy." But I worked harder, stayed later, showed them I wasn't here to play. Slowly, respect replaced doubt. Still, every time I sat in Dad's old chair, I felt the ghost of Mark's glare burning into me. One night, I opened the drawer of my desk and pulled out the medal. I turned it in my hands, the metal cool, heavy. For years it had been a secret shame, proof of battles no one would ever acknowledge. Now, it was proof of something else. That I had survived. That I was stronger than the shadows. That Dad was right to trust me. Julia called occasionally, checking in. "How's civilian command?" she teased once. "Different battlefield," I answered with a weary smile. But when I hung up, I realized she was right. The war with Mark wasn't over, it had just changed shape. It wasn't about bullets or blood anymore. It was about legacy, and whether I could carry it without letting it destroy me. As I locked up the office that night, I stepped outside into the cool air, the town quiet around me. For the first time, I felt a strange mix of peace and grief. I had won the battle in court. But at what cost? Mark's rage. My father's absence. The hollow victory of finally being seen. Too late for the person whose recognition mattered most. I whispered into the night. "Dad, I kept my promise. But God, it hurts." Zero. The wind carried the words away, leaving me alone with the weight of victory that felt far too much like loss. Taking control of Donovan Construction was nothing like I imagined. I thought inheriting Dad's company would feel like victory, like vindication. Instead, it felt like stepping into a storm. Papers piled higher than I could read. Contracts snarled with loopholes. And employees who had spent decades under Dad's command now looked to me. Me. The forgotten daughter turned reluctant heir for answers. Some whispered, "She doesn't know what she's doing." Others nodded politely but kept their loyalty reserved for Mark, even after the court's ruling. But I had weathered worse storms. So I stayed late, night after night, my limp dragging me across the office floor as I combed through contracts, payrolls, safety reports. I listened, really listened to the workers, the ones Dad always said kept the company alive. And slowly, piece by piece, Donovan Construction began to shift. Not into Mark's empire of profit, but into something better, something lasting. The turning point came one morning when I gathered the staff in the break room. I know things have been uncertain, I began, hands trembling slightly. But this company wasn't built on numbers alone. It was built on people. And from now on, we're going to invest in people first. I unveiled the plan. The Richard Donovan Foundation, a fund carved from company profits to support local veterans and their families. Job training, counseling, scholarships. A safety net for those who came home with scars no one could see. At first, the room was silent. Then, slowly, one man, an old foreman who'd worked under Dad for 30 years, stood and clapped. Others joined, and for the first time since Dad's death, I felt a spark of pride instead of grief. This was how I would honor him. This was how I would turn pain into purpose. Mark, of course, hated it. He cornered me after a board meeting, his voice sharp. "You're bleeding the company dry with charity. Dad built this place to make money, not play savior." I met his glare without flinching. "Dad built this place to build lives. You just never noticed." His jaw clenched, but he had no answer. That night, I sat alone in my office, staring at Dad's chair. The medal lay on the desk beside the new foundation charter. For years, both had been hidden: my service, my worth. Now they were the pillars of something new. And for the first time in a long time, I felt whole. Months passed. The company stabilized. The foundation grew. Families thanked me. Veterans shook my hand with tears in their eyes. Slowly, respect replaced doubt. And then one evening, long after the office emptied, I heard the door creak open. It was Mark. He looked older, worn. The fire in his eyes had dimmed to embers. He stood awkwardly in the doorway, hands shoved deep in his pockets. "I shouldn't be here," he muttered. "Then why are you?" I asked, my voice steady. He hesitated, then sighed. "Because I can't keep carrying this hate. It's eating me alive. And maybe I was wrong." The words stunned me. For years, I had dreamed of hearing Mark admit it. But now, standing there, it didn't feel triumphant. It felt sad. "You were wrong," I said softly. "You spent your life trying to keep me small, and all it did was break us." His shoulders sagged. "I know. I can't undo it. But maybe I can try to do better. For Dad. For you." Silence stretched between us. Finally, I nodded. Trying is a start. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a crack in the wall between us. The next morning, I drove to the cemetery alone. The sun rose behind the headstones, painting the sky gold. I knelt at Dad's grave, my hands brushing the cool stone. "Dad," I whispered, my throat thick. "The company is safe. The foundation is running. Mark, he's trying. And me, I'm still standing." I closed my eyes, tears slipping free. "Thank you for seeing me before it was too late. Thank you for trusting me. I hope I've made you proud." The wind stirred, rustling the grass. For a moment, I almost heard his voice in it, warm and steady. "I am proud, Claire. I always was, you just couldn't see it." I pressed my forehead to the stone, letting the tears fall, not from pain this time, but from release. When I rose, the world felt lighter. The scars still ached. The limp still slowed me. The memories still haunted me, but I carried them differently now. Not as weights dragging me down, but as proof of what I had survived. I wasn't invisible anymore. I wasn't the forgotten Donovan. I was Claire Donovan, soldier, survivor, daughter, leader. And from the ashes of everything I had lost, I had built something no one could ever take from me again.